Yeah, well done to the band. That is one of my favorite songs. I asked Chris and the band to put that out there because it describes what I want to talk about today. And that is grabbing life and living life to the fullest, to take the adventure. That's a song named The Adventure. And it talks about how we don't want to live a passive life. We don't want to just put our time in. We don't want to be bored. We want to go after it. And importantly, I can't live, I can't breathe unless I do it with you. It's the impact that we have in each other's lives. I'm actually going to have that song at my funeral. It's written into my will. Hopefully they do what I ask. It is a story that I'm inviting everybody that I know into. And so I want to share that with you today as we consider what we're living for. I want to invite you into something that's much bigger than any one of our individual stories. It's happened to me over the last several weeks that I've had more funerals happen than I remember at any point in time. More people getting sick with serious illnesses than I remember at any point in my life. And as I go through those different moments, it's really important we think about writing a life story that's worth telling so that when we're done here, we have the chance to say, yeah, that's what I stood for. That's what I was about. And God used me in a way that was just phenomenal. So whether you've been following Him for a long time, you're just starting out on your journey, you're not even sure He's there, this message is to challenge us that we as a community can live life in a bold, aggressive way rather than sit back and let it happen. As I go to these funerals, it is really, really staggering to think about what we live for. And as I kind of noticed the ones that mattered and were far more impactful, more powerful to me, they were stories that people wrote with their lives that invested in other people. They literally were about serving other people. They had a different authorship of that story. And so I wanted to use some literary metaphors about how we can choose to live and what kind of clues there are inside our life so that our life matters the most. When I shifted from business into ministry, I didn't know how many different kinds of invitations I'd have to get involved with families, with individuals where their life was at a juncture that was really, really either a crisis or something significant like a birth of a child or a wedding, or maybe it was the passing of life in a funeral. And as I was invited into those moments, I said, these are the things that matter the most. That we have this moment, this juncture where we ask questions. All of us are in that place. We start asking ourselves. It's the thing that distinguishes us from all other animals. We get the questions of, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Does my life matter? Am I making a difference? Am I using the gifting that I uniquely have, or am I just putting time in? What are the kind of changes I should make that would make my life more interesting? Or am I just cranking out the hours, coming home, putting time in, and turning on Netflix? Man, the invitation to a bigger story is something I really, really want to think about. And so as we do so, I want to give you 3 literary terms that are used to write interesting stories, because that's what I want us to do. And the first one is misdirection. Misdirection is a very, very smart tactic that either writers or magicians use to get people to pay attention to the wrong thing while they're doing something over here. And those misdirections are things that you and I walk into every day, maybe every month for sure. In our lifetime, many major misdirections. And so the earlier that we can recognize those, the better. Number 2, it's the term foreshadowing, which has to do with giving clues about a bigger story, something that we're waiting or anticipating further out. The more subtle the foreshadow, the cooler it is when the story reveals it. And so discerning, understanding, recognizing those foreshadowing moments has a huge impact on what kind of a story we're going to write with our lives. And then thirdly, plot twists. Plot twists have to do with changes of direction. As we move from one toward another path, they become so much more powerful and more fulfilling. And so as we consider this writing of a life story, I want to use those 3 tactics throughout. One of the things I want to use, I want to point to the most, is that our best story requires recognizing clues that spike interest. So it's up to us to recognize what those clues are. And so as we go through, I'm going to use the story of Peter and his journey with Jesus. And as you know, as you probably know, Peter was a major character in the New Testament. He was a friend of Jesus. He walked with him for 3 years. He was a fisherman prior to becoming one of the main disciples. And as he did so, he left behind everything that he was all about. He had built his life around becoming a fisherman and being a successful fisherman. He had a nice business at the edge of the Sea of Galilee. And it's there where Peter's story starts. Jesus comes up to him and his brother and he says, "Hey, guys, come follow me. I want you to follow me and I will make you fishers, not of fish, but of men." What kind of an invitation is that? It's pretty wild. And it was compelling enough, and whatever else he said that wasn't recorded, that these guys dropped their nets, dropped their business, and they followed Jesus for 3 years. Now, along the way, there was a lot of misdirection, and there was a lot of foreshadowing that was going on. And so the plot twist that we're about to read together is all part of the clues in Peter's life. And it's important as you consider that to think that Jesus started with this guy and said, "I've got something big planned for you." And it was Peter who was in the courtyard before Jesus was killed who denied he even knew him. Now, kudos to Peter because he ended up going into the courtyard. He was apparently the only one who was there amongst the disciples, and he sat there and wanted to find out what's happening to my Lord. But when they took Jesus and they started accusing him of being associated with them, and he could see where it was going, he denied ever knowing him. And so Jesus was killed and buried. And what does Peter do? That's where we'll pick up this amazing story. It's in John chapter 21, verses 3 through 9. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. So 7 of them are meeting together, and Peter says the following, "I'm going out to fish." And they said, "We'll go with you." Now let's just hold it there for a second and think of this. This guy has led for 3 years and shown miracles, invited them into an incredible story. He even told them on the Thursday before he was killed that he was going to be killed and sacrificed. Peter sees what's happening, and he's discouraged. And when Jesus is buried, he goes back to his friends, and he's sitting with them. And what does he go to? He goes back to what he knew. He goes back to what's familiar. He goes back to the thing that made the most sense, the safe thing. So he goes back to fishing. He says, "I'm going to go fishing." And so what happens from there? So they went out and they got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples couldn't realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" Now let's hold there for a second. Here's a guy who's standing on the shore, and he's shouting out to them. These are professional fishermen, and he's obviously kind of goading them on. He sees that they don't have any fish. It would have been apparent. They wouldn't have been still fishing. And he knew that they were out all night, so these fishermen are probably a little defensive. I think it was more of a sarcastic tone that Jesus was using. "Hey, how's that going for you?" Now here these guys had been following him for years, and they're all out going fishing. It had to be embarrassing and provoking, and they're probably sitting there going, "Who's this wise guy sitting at the shore picking on us?" They didn't know it was Jesus. And Jesus, I think, is pointing back to this incredible metaphor where he was first at the same shore. I was able to see where Peter lived, and I was there at the shore. It's just a very, very short walk away. And as he was at the same shore that he invited them to come in and become fishers of men, Jesus is there saying, "Hey, what's going on now? Why are you doing what you're doing?" And so it's this incredibly provocative question. What are you going back to? What's the story you're writing? Peter, what's going on? And so they say no. They didn't catch anything. Well, Jesus says, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." So here's Jesus telling them, "I've got something bigger planned for you, but let me just show you practically that it's me, the Lord." And so what does he say? Throw it on the right side, and good things will happen. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." All of a sudden, they recognize him. As soon as Peter heard him say it, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he'd taken it off, and he jumped in the water. When the other disciples landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. It's an incredible story. This is a beautiful read. If we miss how funny this is and how powerful this is, I think it's one of the best stories in the entire New Testament. Here's Jesus poking, saying, "Guys, I invited you into changing the world. I told you you'd be fishers of men, and here you are looking for the same old, same old. I'm killed for a couple of days, and what do you go to?" And so they're out there trying to collect fish, and he says, "Just toss it on the other side, and I'll show you that I'm the Lord." And John, seeing these full nets, goes, "Wait a minute. Is that Jesus? That's Jesus." He's inviting us to so much more. And so this incredible misdirection where Peter denies Jesus, where Peter had gone through so many different kind of incredible inspirational moments, he's now reverting back and missing the story that Jesus was inviting him into. Man, that just speaks to me, because I know that my life is the same way. And so the first thing that I want us to do as a community is to identify in our individual lives what it is that we have as misdirections. And the first point is to minimize the misdirection consequences that we have. We need to minimize those because they end up tripping us. Now, I'm not saying that you can completely avoid them. All of us go through these things. They hit us, and we see them, we step into them. But the question is, what do we do when they come? Do we read them for what they are? Do we read them for trip-ups? Do we read them for misdirection in our life? You see, life is unwieldy, it's difficult. Things come at us, they seem to make sense, they satisfy us for a moment. We may turn our eye there, but it's not the part of our story that we're being invited into. And so these guys who are being invited into this story take the easiest path, and they go back to fishing. Now, it reminds me of another great story. When writers try to write, they put in misdirection all the time so that we look a certain way, and really, he's calling us to a bigger story. Maximus, in the movie Gladiator, is a perfect example of this. This great warrior ends up having a whole bunch of bad stuff happen to him. He gets captured, and he's put in basically a fighting band of warriors where he becomes a gladiator and has to fight for his life in the arena. And people are betting on him, and he becomes a war hero, basically a gladiator hero. And he's being invited into a basically very comfortable life, though you are killing people in a ring. And he says, "Okay, I get this. I'm being invited into a story where I can make my name uniquely known." He becomes a hero once he comes back to Rome as this gladiator. And yet the calling on his life was much larger. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who was killed by his son, said, "Maximus, I want you, not my son, to lead Rome. And I want you to take it away from this dictatorship, this autocracy, and I want you to move it to a republic. I want the senators and the people directing the government, not some autocratic system." And so the question before Maximus is this: are you going to live for yourself, or are you going to live a bigger story, one that's aimed at Rome? And I think Jesus is asking us the same question today that he asked Peter and that the writer asked Maximus. Who is it that we're serving? That's the first question. We can tell misdirection in our life when we know that it points back to our world, things that satisfy us, things that are self-occupying, things that are all about our comfort, our margin. Because if we make those choices that serve only us or that disproportionately serve us, we're missing a lot of the invitation. And the second question I ask about misdirection is, who's the author of this part of the story? Am I the author? Am I the one that's writing out because I want to control my circumstances, because I like this more? Or could it be that God is actually the author of this story, and he's inviting me into something so much bigger, and I'm missing it? And so as we answer those two questions, we're able to discern, is this in fact misdirection, or is it a healthy, bold, ambitious, world-changing invitation? And that would be the second literary part that I'd like to have us think about. And that is foreshadowing. Because there's clues that I believe God is giving to us each that uniquely reveal the things that make our heart pound a little bit faster. And so the second point is to uncover the vital foreshadowing. Find out those points that uniquely are going to turn our hearts and be beating a little extra, making a bigger impact in the world, changing the lives of more people. I'm not saying we all have to run for city council or some kind of government or start our own companies or jump into ministry or anything like that. But I believe that God is asking us to look at the story of your life and say, what is it? Is it misdirection or is it foreshadowing? And so as we look at Peter's life, it's incredible. Peter's life has this foreshadowing planted throughout. And as we evaluate the story that we just read, you have to point back to Jesus inviting him to become a fisher of men. That's foreshadowing. Peter, I got a big dream for you. He took him to Caesarea Philippi along with all the other disciples. They walked up to this enormous cave. And this cave had infant sacrifice. This cave had sexual prostitutes that would be in the name of the church and the small g gods before them. It had all this crazy depravity captured in this one place. They used to call it the gates of hell. And so Jesus walks a long distance to get to Caesarea Philippi, this gorgeous resort community where they had this shrine to the god Pan. And as he walks them up there, he asks the disciples, who do you guys say that I am? And it's Peter who says, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah. And Jesus says, upon this understanding, your insight that in fact I am the Messiah, it's on this that my church will start. It's not on you, Peter, the individual. It's often misinterpreted that. It's upon this rock, this understanding that I am the Christ, that my church will come and this kingdom will start coming here on earth. Ironic that Peter, the one who came up with you are the Christ, is sitting in a room and then going fishing, catching nothing. That happens. That happens because we miss the foreshadowing. It was Peter who had the boldness to take the sword and lop off the guard's ear when they were trying to take Jesus away on the night he was betrayed. Peter had time and time again been confirmed. Yes, you're critical in where we're going, Peter. I want to use you. I want to build my kingdom here on earth, and you have a vital cog. The foreshadowing in his life was profound. And it's not that easy to discern between the misdirection and to move away from the comfort. I know this because I lived it in my own life. I know that, I grew up and I had incredible foreshadowing happen when I was in high school. I was invited into the National Prayer Breakfast as a high schooler. I had the chance to actually come and pray with the president and with senators and congresspeople and other leaders in Washington. My senior year in high school, I had the opportunity with, turns out now, my wife to do the speaking for our senior party at the end of the year with freshmen through senior year, all celebrating at our youth group. I had people who were prophesying over me saying, you are going to be in full-time ministry. God's going to use you in a powerful way. Don't turn your eyes from that. In college. And yet I was so eager to change the course of what I was doing that I missed that foreshadowing and I got into business. Now, it turns out that was part of my story. God was asking me and inviting me to get these different types of experience because it was those experiences that were going to help me with ministry. It wasn't just a traditional path of going to seminary and learning theology. It was, no, I want to use your ability to develop things. I want to use your business skills, and I want to take those and point them at church. But it was over and over again that I started hearing more foreshadowing 10, 15 years ago. God was saying, I have something planned for you. And I'm going to change your circumstance, and the question is, are you going to read it and respond well or not? And so it was clues about starting a ministry where we actually consolidated and tried to attack the city with love, different kinds of outreaches, partner with different kind of social service agencies, launch new ministries, pool the different churches across Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky. And as I stepped into that, God showed some favor, and now it's brought our journey here in Central Kentucky. It's an amazing story, and I wouldn't trade any of it, but I missed so much because I was paying attention to misdirection. I paid attention to comfort. Now, I'm not exactly saying this. You all need to come into ministry, far from it. Ministry is not what you think it is. It is not an easy path. I am not saying God's asking you to leave your job and come into full-time vocational ministry. Far from it. But I am saying there are clues that are happening in your life. And the question is, do you have the discernment? Can you recognize the things that are happening that are misdirection and the things that are invitations through foreshadowing and what God wants? And when you get to that point, are you able to take them and respond? I believe that it has so much to do with who the beneficiaries of your gifting are. There's an amazing metaphor that I saw in person in Israel. It came as a result of the land. And for those of us who had the opportunity to hear from this little Jewish guy who came and taught last summer, Aryeh Bar David, he capitalized on what the land was as he taught us about what Jesus did while he was here. And he took us to a place up north in Israel, and it was the Sea of Galilee, a place that was incredible life, incredible lushness. And then we went later to the Dead Sea. And the contrast between those two seas was profound. I'll show you pictures here in a second. What happens is that the water enters into the Sea of Galilee, and it's actually the same water that runs through the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. So it's actually the same life-giving water that comes into the Sea of Galilee that goes into the Dead Sea. Yet the contrast of these two lakes is profound. Let's take a look at just what the difference is. This is on the edge of Tiberias, a place that is lush and fertile with crops growing crazily, green all over the place. You see the lake just up there to the right. They call it the Sea of Galilee. It's more like a huge lake to us. Here we're on top of a little hill where you see mustard seed that has just sprung forth in the springtime because of the water. The climate is beautiful and the surrounding area is all green. And yet this water is the same water that runs through the Jordan and creates the Dead Sea landscape and environment. Let's take a look at what the Dead Sea looks like. Death. It's desolate. It's tan. There's no green. You can see that it's just filled with salt, and it's killing everything that goes into it. And yet it's the same water. So what's the difference? The difference is that same water that comes from the mountains in Syria, bypassing Mount Hermon, dumping into the Sea of Galilee, has an outlet through the Sea of Galilee. That water comes in, creates life. There's tons of fish, there's tons of vegetation, there's tons of entertainment, all on the Sea of Galilee, and that water has an outlet. What's blessed with the Sea of Galilee gets a chance to bless other tributaries, and it goes down through the Jordan, and it hits the Dead Sea. Now, the difference is the Dead Sea has absolutely no outlet. The Dead Sea is a pool of death. There's no life in it. In fact, they're asking you to be careful if you have any cuts. When you go in there, you could get an infection. It's pretty nasty. So on and so forth. It's a crazy thing. That's one of the reasons you float. There's so much salt. You actually go in there and you can float, kind of like some of the other lakes and tributaries in the world. You get a chance to sit in the middle of that death. And there's no life, no green, except for a resort that's right at the base of the Dead Sea, where they pump in different fresh water. That contrast couldn't make it any more simple and straightforward. If we take what we get and we give it away, life comes through us. If we take what God's given us and we sit on it and we hold it as tight as we can, it creates death. Our lives and our life stories become boring. They become lifeless. So the challenge is, how are we going to take this and give it away? What is it that God is inviting us into? Point 3, not only do we need to discern the difference between what a misdirection and a foreshadow are, but we have to take what we understand and put it into action. We need to step into the key plot twists. So the question I give you today is, what are you going to do differently? What is the plot twist that God is inviting me to today? how is it that in my life I can take a new direction and create even more life by giving away what he's given me? And it's an incredible invitation. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, God invites us to the following. It's a great verse, one of my absolute favorites. It says that, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." It says we have these opportunities and they're all around us. The question is whether we're going to see it. Are we recognizing through foreshadow what God is inviting us into? And if we do, we become his masterpiece. The word for workmanship has been so often interpreted as masterpiece. And as I look even deeper into it, it's the word poema. And it's a story about a poem that was handcrafted by God. It's a masterpiece of a story that has beauty and impact through a poem. His hand is writing a story with our lives when we step into the unique things that he's written before us, the unique opportunities that Paul talks about in the book of Ephesians. Are we going to become his workmanship, his masterpiece, his poem? It depends on whether we respond. Our natural inclination is to avoid change, to avoid the hard thing, to avoid the next adventure. In fact, author Donald Miller talks about it in a book that he wrote called "A Million Miles in 10,000 Years." And he talks about the impact of story. He gives us a clue as to how resistant to change we are as humans when he writes this quote. He says, "A general rule in writing stories is that characters don't want to change. They must be forced to change. Nobody wakes up and starts chasing a bad guy or dismantling a bomb unless something forces them to do so. We'd rather not put ourselves in peril. It means a heck of a lot of work and a lot of risk. So the invitation is, do we want to step into that frontier? Are we ready to give away the very thing that we cling so tightly, our life? The more we give away our life, the more impact that it has, the more interesting the story." And so those funerals that I loved going to were the places where I saw people say, "I want to give my life away. I want to get out of my comfort, and I want to see change." And there was a phenomenal funeral that I got to go to. It was a friend of mine who died after a real long bout with cancer. But the story of her life had nothing to do with the cancer. It had to do with a moment in time where people had been foreshadowing her gifting and how she was going to use it. She was invited by a ministry partner down in Haiti and a pastor here locally who spoke into her life and said, "Hey, there's some women down in Haiti, and they don't have the chance to get married, and there's a whole bunch of reasons behind that, but we'd like to try to help them get married. When they're not married, they can't participate in the church. They can't even be baptized." Now, I know that sounds crazy, but they can't be baptized. They can't participate. They're not engaging in life. But if we can help them get married, they'll be in a whole new place. And so they asked this friend of mine, and she responded. She says, "I'm available." Now they said, "You're too pretty and too clean that you're not going to want to go down there. But if you just create these dresses," well, it seems that it doesn't seem. She actually had a dress shop for bridal parties. She would make these beautiful wedding gowns, and she had some inventory that she said, "Of course, I can take these and give them away." But her life meant so much more than just making gowns. She said, "No, I want to change the direction. I want to respond, and I want to be the one who goes down there and works with these women and throws these amazing wedding parties." And over 9 years, she had 600 families impacted. 60 the first year, 40. It was on and on and on. Amazing results because she was available. And she said, I don't care about getting dirty. I want to be in that battle." And she took what she had, just like the Sea of Galilee, and said, "I need an outlet. I need to give this away. I know God's calling me to a bigger story." And lives changed because of it, because of that generosity. And it's not just finance. It's your time. It's your heart. It's your passion. What is it that you're giving out to the people around you? What is the story that we're writing with our days? There's a beautiful verse that starts out and it says, in Psalm 90, verse 12. I want you to count my days, Lord. I want to count my days. I want to number them. But it's not this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbering, but teach us to mana our days. And that word directly translated means to reckon, to have significance, to make an impact with my days. I want you to count these days. These days need to count in other people's lives. It's an invitation to what are we going to do with our time, with the calories that we have, with our money, with our hours, with our relationships, with our work, with what's in front of us. So I want to invite us to say, what does that look like? What are the key misdirections that we've unfortunately taken the wrong step toward? Usually that's self-fulfilling. What are the foreshadowings, the invitations that we've uniquely heard that can give more life and give it away? And what are the plot twists that are right in front of us that we have the chance to step into? I'll give you just a few seconds to say, what is it, God, that you're saying to us individually? I'm sure those clues are in your life now. The question is how you're going to respond. One of the most simple ways that we can do that, we do this about 2 or 3 times a year, is we invite you to say, here's a practical way to get you started, to get you connected here, to get engaged. And it's volunteering. We offered it for kind of just a short term around Super Bowl, but I want to take today and say, this is something we all need to step into. It's not for other people. Chris opened up by interviewing some people at Kids Club. We showed a Kids Club volunteering video. There's so many other kinds of things that you can do around here. Brian Tome, our senior pastor, is on vacation now, but I asked him if he had any words, and he said, yeah, I'd like to record a video. Let's take a look at what Brian said to us about the opportunity to volunteer.
Hello, Lexington. Great being with you today. Well, what is it the Crossroads about? You know what we're about? We're about people, connecting people to a community of growing Christ followers who are changing the world. You know what? All that's happening. We have people who are coming in relationship with God for the very first time. We have a lot of us who've known God for a long, long time and are growing deeper and deeper in our faith with Jesus. And the world is changing. How does the world change? It changes because somebody decides to give of themselves, of their time. It could be something as relatively simple as handing out a program or a card, or something as profound as serving with somebody in Kids Club, serving a child, forming a child spiritually. No matter what you're doing on the team, as you're investing into people with your time, you as a volunteer, as a worker, are getting stuff done. Lives are changing. The world is changing. And I'm honored to be on the same team with you.
It's a simple next step. Before we go any further, I want to recognize the people who are part of this volunteer team. So if you are a volunteer around here, it takes literally over 100 people to pull off a weekend. You're part of that. I want to recognize you. I like the rest of us to applaud, to show you the respect and the appreciation that we have for you. Go ahead and stand up. If you have any kind of a serving role around here, I want to recognize you. If you have a volunteer tag, if you've been on prayer teams, if you've been doing Kids Club, if you've been doing First Impressions, whatever it is, stay standing. These guys make this happen. This experience happens because of their generosity. And we often think, oh, no, we're great. That's good for you. Yeah, I know you like that. No. They're serving. The people in the band, the people in the tech room, the people in the sound booth, they come here on Wednesday or Thursday nights and do run-throughs. They practice for hours to create an A-game quality experience that we all get to step into. They come here every Sunday morning at 6-something. I'm not even here yet. They come and they start practicing and organizing and getting ready for what we experience. There's people who start putting cones in the parking lot. People who are putting together the kind of things that you get given in your hand as you walk in the auditorium, whether they're greeters holding doors open for you, or people who are coming in the auditorium, taking up offering, whatever it is. People in spiritual growth who are helping build into team leaders. People who are doing the prayer and the communion services that we have. We've got people investing in the middle school and high school lives. The people in student ministry are shaping future lives. Kids Club, I want to recognize you separately. What you do is phenomenal. What you do is so generous. You are shaping little lives for the rest of eternity. They come in as sponges, and we give, and we share our heart, and as a result, lives are changed. Man, we showed that video. It's incredibly compelling. I want everybody to stand now and join whoever's left standing. I told you standing people not to sit down. What were you thinking? Everybody get up, and we're going to sing. And while we sing, I know some of us can do it. You were given a volunteer card. I misplaced mine. You were given a volunteer card, and if you're not a person who's already said, yes, I'll give this little bit of my Sunday, I want to challenge you to step in and be part of the Sea of Galilee. That the things that God's given you, even in the littlest of ways, you can take and you can give away on Sunday mornings. And I know some of us go out of town on the weekends and we're inconsistent. It doesn't matter. We can find a role for you that you can contribute. You can use your gifting and change the world around you. I want you to fill these cards out and say, yes, I want one of these boxes checked. I want to step into what you have. And we'll give you a lanyard. You won't get an orange one because these are for our experts, people that you go to and ask questions. But you get a lanyard and you get a name tag, and it means I'm in. I care enough about what's happening here that I want to give my time and I want to invest in other people. I want to take what God's given me and give it away. And so grab those cards. I want to see a lot of them filled out. I want all of us in that game. And as we do so, I want to sing this song and remember a song and the words that it is, that we want to seek your face and not your hands. We don't just want to get. We want to be intimate with you. We want your story to be written in our hearts, that we can take that and write it on other people's hearts, not with ink or on tablets of stone, as it says in the scripture, but on the hearts of man. That's the invitation. So as Chris and the band lead us in this song, I want us to sing with all our heart about becoming more of his hands and his feet, becoming more like the Sea of Galilee that gives away what he's given to us.
Here we go. Hear your voice when you call us out to the unknown, uncertain. You will call to mind your angels' faithfulness to your people, your creation. We will look to you, the author of our lives. Whatever pleases you will be our best. Take what we have for what we live. You seek your face and out of your head, yeah. Whatever pleases you will be our best. Sing that again, whatever pleases you will be our best. Take what we have for what we live. Your face and out of your hands. Whatever pleases you will be our best.
So I challenge us to be the community that says we want to take what we get from you, Lord, and give it away. That whether you've been following for years and you just become stale, whether you're already serving and you're just not in the sweet spot, what is it that God's revealing to you? Whether it's through understanding your misdirection or applying the foreshadowing in your life, what's the plot twist that he's asking you to step into right now? I want to be the community that does that and changes Central Kentucky. So as you do so, let's sing again at how much we love him and how we want to step into that. I want you to sign those cards, drop them in the blue boxes as you get out there, and take a new yellow, we'll be there for you lanyard.
Will be our breath. Drink what we have, what we live. You will seek your face and out of your
step into the call that God has on your life. I'll see you next week and have a great one.